So, Dr. Thorp, I wanted to ask you first, what does the pro-life movement mean to you?
When I was an undergraduate and in medical school, my motivation for pro-life things were the obvious fact that fetuses are human beings and that ending fetal life was wrong. To quote Lincoln about slavery, if this isn't wrong, then there's nothing wrong. Over the years, experience has taken me further to see pro-life as women's empowerment, the very attribute that makes women unique, and that they can have babies and grow human beings inside their bodies is taken away in a pregnancy termination. And while there are some exceptions when a woman actually wants an abortion, they are few and far between. And what most pregnant women, whether planned or unplanned, want to be supported and nurtured and taken care of. And we see that in our perinatal substance abuse work, where people think they have to do something because of the contempt around substance use disorders, and particularly substance use disorders in pregnancy. But that if we can empower them with treatment of their disease and work and education and housing and the things that we all want, then they thrive. And so I really see the pro-life movement in a much broader sense, and as being a woman's empowerment movement, and not and in empowering women, we will take care of their fetuses.
So, Dr. White, what does the pro-life generation mean to you?
I have had a sort of evolution and broadening of my understanding of what the pro-life movement is really about. And, you know, I would describe it as a movement of empowerment, yes. And for me, even further than that, I think it's a movement of hope, quite frankly. And the reason I say that is that when I think of myself as a pro-life person, a pro-life professional, pro-life clinician, I am really referring to what I now come to see as kind of a lens that I wear. And so with the lenses, the pro-life lenses that I try to wear with every encounter with everyone I meet, I try to see the world with an emphasis on human dignity and value, and not just in a global kind of vague sense, but actually, you know, if I might say that the unique and individual person has this intrinsic dignity and value, regardless of their life circumstances, or, you know, their stage in development, or their age, or their race, or their sex, or, you know, what they've contributed to society or what they haven't contributed to society. And so with this set of lenses on, I think it's very clear no one's life is a mistake or an accident, you know, regardless of the circumstances of your conception. And I really think there is something to be said for the pro-life view that every individual actually belongs to the human family. It's not enough just to say that you are included. It's a lot of discussion today about inclusion, but you actually belong. You're meant to be here. And you're unique and irreplaceable and unrepeatable. And so that, again, I think it sounds simple, maybe it sounds aspirational, but I think it's really critical in the time that we find ourselves in as a nation, because there's so much dialogue today around just various issues of concern, whether about racism or injustice or the environment. These issues actually are concepts and topics that the pro-life community has something to say about. And what is it that our lenses are showing us and telling us? It's that your life actually matters. And so that's been a theme that our nation is really having a dialogue about. How much does your life matter? Well, it matters with incredible value. We can't put a price on it. And so I really see that as a very hopeful message. And I think this is a very important time to be contributing to the national dialogue and building bridges with people who are using similar language, because it can be just a point of resonance. I think that makes sense for so many people, regardless of, where they fall on the political or the social spectrum. So the pro-life movement has a lot to offer in terms of those messages of hope and respect for human dignity. And so that's really what that term means to me at this stage in my life and my career.
Has being pro-life impacted either of you in your medical career?
I actually wasn't always pro-life. I was very strongly pro-choice in college and in my early adulthood. And for me, my thinking changed in a moment of self-reflection. I actually had an epiphany. And I have to say that it really wasn't because of anyone's powerful argument or witty reasoning, or I didn't go to a great, mind-blowing talk. I didn't read a wonderful book that just made it all crystal clear for me. I was really discerning what my professional path should be in medicine. And I realized that, my life really did have meaning and purpose and value. And then it kind of dawned on me, if mine does, then how could it be any different for anyone else? And so that was kind of a pivotal moment for me. And I had to go back and rethink my perspective on what to prioritize as a clinician. And so that's really, I would say, what changed my course and the decisions that I then made going forward as a professional.
It got me a much better residency and job than I ever deserved, because I was willing to take a stand when somebody needed to do so. It also has probably harmed an academic career and shut doors that would otherwise maybe have become open. As I tell our young residents who are fussy about being pro-life in a field where they're in a minority, and sometimes that results in extra work and sometimes it results in contempt, that if virtue were easy, everybody would be virtuous, and that virtue typically has personal cost to do the right thing at the right time. But virtue also has great blessings and unintended consequences, and for which I'm grateful also. So I wouldn't try to discourage any body.
What would you say to those who claim a fetus is not a viable human being?
What were you at a similar gestational age?
Yeah, I generally actually try to actively avoid the types of debates that get into trying to prove that, there's a particular stage at which an embryo or a fetus has particular capabilities or characteristics that we ought to, consider important for their value as a human being. I generally don't engage in those kinds of debates around even, personhood, like is every human being a person? Well, how do you know? There are plenty of very intelligent people who have very detailed philosophical arguments about such things. I would probably answer that question by saying, actually, you might be right. at very early gestational ages, embryos and very, very young fetuses are not viable to live outside of their mother's bodies. And yet, I really think it's important to, respect the dignity of every human being, regardless of where they are in the life cycle, because we all start off in the same place. And it is, in fact, there are stages of development. So at the earliest stages of development or the latest stages of development, we each have value and purpose and meaning. And that's how I see life.
But I would add that, and it'll answer another question. We're all just a clump of cells, and unless we have souls. And in the field that Dr. White and I work in, most people believe that fetuses are potential human beings. They freeze them, they preserve them, they transfer them, they cry when they lose them. They call it a baby when they see it on ultrasound and say your baby has a heartbeat or you have two babies. And so it's really not, I think it's more of a layperson argument than it is a scientific argument, that at least it is a potential human being.
Thank you for joining us, Mr. Stam. What does the pro-life movement mean to you?
Thanks, Timmy. Let me tell you how I got into it. As a child, my favorite books were Dr. Seuss. One of my favorite was Horton Hears a Who, about little elephants and things, person to person, no matter how small. And I always liked, the stories of heroes who would protect children or women in distress, but especially children. And this is sort of how I got into this. When I was in college, I was at one time taking biology, philosophy, and law at the same time. And I realized, obvious biology, that the child is a child, a human being. There's no, it was philosophically impossible to draw some artificial demarcation between, 6 weeks or 10 weeks or 24 weeks. And so that's sort of when I became sort of an activist on this. When I was first in practice, I had a client, a fifth-year radiology student at Chapel Hill, who was 2 weeks from graduation. She was doing a what do you call a rotation in ultrasound. And on her lunch break, she talked with a lady who was there for an abortion at 24 weeks. At that time, Chapel Hill was doing up to 24 weeks. And she shared from the Bible with this lady what was actually in her. And, from the ultrasound, she showed her what the Bible was talking about. And the lady said, "Oh, no kidding." So the lady went home, didn't have the abortion. And by the way, the kid did fine later. But she was suspended from school and told she wouldn't graduate because she had breached medical ethics. At that time, if you were there for the abortion, they wouldn't show you the ultrasound. If you're there for prenatal care, they would. That was sort of revelatory to me. And then to answer one question, because this also confirmed this in my mind, to answer a question that was presented to Dr. White and Dr. Thorp, what would you say to somebody, who said there may not be a viable person? Well, of course, the child who's 6 months old isn't viable either. They would die the next day or 2 or 3 days later, if left alone. I had the opportunity to take the deposition of two abortionists and debate a professor at Chapel Hill and an abortionist, and also to debate Malcolm Potts on the radio at UNC, who was a very well-known abortionist. And all four of these abortionists, when asked, said, "Yeah, of course the embryo is a human being. What else is it?" So whenever I hear that, question that there's some debate scientifically about what this entity is, what I say is, well, even the abortionists don't agree with you on that. That's just silly science to say it's something else. So that's how it started with me, was disliking children and wanting to protect little people. And that's how I got into it. And then I sort of by accident got into the litigation part of it.
So over time, how would you say the conversation about abortion has changed regarding law in our country?
It's changed a lot, Emmy. 47 years ago, was it 47 years ago? Yes. Conversation was much more pro-abortion than it is today. Now, it doesn't mean that everybody, today nobody's extremely pro-abortion. They are, but there's a lot more people who understand what's going on because of ultrasound. By the time kids get into high school, they've probably seen an ultrasound, whether on television or the siblings, ultrasound of their siblings, or somebody's told them what it is. And so does your generation. I don't know how old you are, but I'll just say your generation is a lot more pro-life than the people 20 years older than you are, or the people 40 years old. Now, the older people, the really old people like my age, a lot of them were against abortion just for tradition. We just don't do that. But they didn't really know what it was that was going on. I would say, those between 15 and 35, which is the prime age at which people get abortions, are much more knowledgeable about what they're actually doing than people were 40 years ago. And that has meant that there have been a lot of laws passed in the last 10 years that have, to the extent that the courts allow us to, have cut down on abortion. And just to give you one statistic, for that first 10 or 15 years after abortion was legalized, it was going on at about 1.5 million a year in this country. And now it's about half of that. So, some of that is because of law, and some of that is because of changed cultural realities amongst younger people.
How would you say abortion laws and restrictions actually benefit women?
Sure. So, for example, the 3-day waiting period. We have many things in the law where we have waiting periods for people to think about their options. For example, if you want to refinance your house, there's a 3-day waiting period between the time you sign all the papers and when you get the money. And that's just a house and money. If you want to get a Medicaid sterilization, and nobody dies in a sterilization, there's a 30-day waiting period and the reason for that, and that's been true for 30 or 40 years. The reason there is because before then there was a lot of coercion and duress put on people to do that. If they were poor, if they were on Medicaid, they were poor, and so they didn't want. They recognized that they had to protect women from overeager social workers who just wanted to see them not have children. So there's a lot of waiting. If you want to buy a vacation timeshare at the beach, you have 3 days to get out of that even after you signed all the papers. So it's a common thought in law that giving people some time to reflect on matters that are not emergencies, and a pregnancy is not an emergency. I mean, it may be an emergency for months, but 3 days is not an emergency. Things don't change much in 3 days. So that's been a very positive thing, I believe.
So thank you so much for joining us tonight, Mrs. Bonk. What does the pro-life movement mean to you?
Thanks, Amy. It's good to be here. Like others have said, it means to me today valuing the dignity and worth of every human person, no matter what their age or stage of development is. I remember back when I was in college in the 70s, we were assigned a paper to write on abortion, and my position was that a woman should have the right to choose at the time. But I also had the conviction that I myself could not do it, but I felt like every woman should have that opportunity if they so chose. And of course, I've changed my position over the years, and I've changed my position because I've seen how abortion hurts women, how it is not pro-woman, the pain and suffering that women have experienced because of abortion. And so I kind of currently look at the movement of pro-life. From my lens, it's a movement of accompaniment. It's walking with post-abortive women and men who have made the decision to have an abortion, but are wounded and seeking healing from that experience. And I see it as, I see myself and others in the movement as being companions on the journey, to help them find the spiritual and the emotional healing that they're really looking for. Because abortion, does hurt the woman. It doesn't just, eliminate the child, but after the abortion, the pregnancy is gone, but the motherhood remains. And this is what most women don't understand before they make that choice. They don't know that they're going to have, shame or guilt or regret. They think they're solving a problem, and they're really just adding more problems.
What does a woman considering her choices need?
Well, so the woman that is pregnant and in a crisis is confused and fearful, overwhelmed. She's likely a victim herself in some way. So what she needs is someone who's going to care about her, someone who wants the best for her, someone who will listen to her and befriend her and help her think through the situation. Not someone who's going to fix her. She's not a project, but someone who is willing to walk with her on this journey and not judge her. I think it's very important that she knows that she has someone in her corner, because most women that are in a crisis pregnancy or crisis situation, or pregnant, and this pregnancy is unwanted, basically, they need someone that's calm. They need someone that cares, that's going to put their needs ahead of their own.
And what should we as students and peers do for women considering their choices, and also post-abortive women?
So there's two situations. One is the woman who's in a crisis, and the other one is the post-abortive woman who has already made that decision. There are similarities. Again, I think they need friendship. They need that understanding of a listening ear. Sometimes I don't know about you, but I didn't always feel comfortable getting into people's business. And I still don't. This is a very private situation. And as I said earlier, I wrote that paper about, well, you should have the right to do what you think is right, and I should have the right to do what I think is right. So sometimes that's still sort of a part of who I am. But over the years, I've come to clearly understand that it's not a coincidence that I'm in that place and at that time. And so I think for all of you who will have the opportunity to speak to someone who's in a crisis pregnancy or someone who's post-abortive and suffering, I just wanted to say to you, have courage, be confident. Yes, you're there for a reason, and this person needs you. This person needs a companion, you're meant to be there. And again, it's what you do, and that's important, and listening without judgment, referring them to a pregnancy resource center. I mean, they're amazing in those places. I mean, they can give so much information and support. That's exactly what they need. So you should have a phone number in your cell phone or a website or email for the pregnancy support resource center in your area. and as well as Project Rachel, you don't have to give a lot of information. You don't have to do all the work. It just kind of see it as you're supposed to calm her down. You're supposed to be her friend. You don't have to go into a lot of pro-life apologetics. In fact, that's not a good time. In either situation, it's not a good time to do that. She just needs someone that's going to walk with her, to love her, to guide her. And that takes a lot of pressure off you too, because you don't have to really even be eloquent to be kind. Yeah, if you just sit there and hold her hand or listen. And I think also, it's important to know that she may not take your advice. If she's pregnant and she goes ahead with the abortion, well, it's not like you didn't succeed, because she might need help. She will need help, at some point in the future. And if you're placed in her path, or you're in her path, you could help refer her to support for, the post-abortion. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that's super helpful. Thank you so much.